Stepping from our ordinary world into the fantastical, Immersive XP explores the weird and wonderful imaginations behind a diverse range of themed experiences. From virtual reality to escape rooms to live-action roleplay, nothing is off the table. We'll take a deep dive into what makes these adventures worth attending and which ones to avoid. Join me on a journey to explore the extraordinary and meet the people who make dreams a reality. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Immersive XP. I'm Taylor Forge, your non-binary host, based in Southern California, seamstress by trade, silly little guy by trauma. Favorite local place to visit? The Huntington Library. Fun fact of the week. While Stockholm Syndrome has been popularized in films, books, and other media, it is highly debated whether it's real or myth. What is Stockholm Syndrome? It's the concept that a bond can be made between a kidnapper and a hostage, where the hostage becomes sympathetic to their captors. The idea originated in 1973 from the Norrmalmstorg bank robbery in Stockholm, Sweden. A notorious thief attempted to rob a bank and took 4 hostages while making demands to release his former jailmate and receive a getaway car. Some of the hostages became scared of the police's methods during the standoff and were more sympathetic to their captor, who was doing more to ensure their safety, and even one hostage advocated for giving into the thief's demands. As a result, Norrmalmstorg syndrome became an idea that became internationally known as Stockholm Syndrome. This has been very rarely seen in reality, and a general consensus by experts is that it's a survival strategy rather than a real mental condition. So next time you see it used in your favorite romance novel, remember that it's simply a trope. This week's episode is a daily quest, which is any immersive experience with a low barrier to entry and no intellectual property attached to it, but still has a certain level of interaction. It's another episode taking place in Las Vegas, but this time an escape room located off the Strip. Joining me again today is Dune Harmon, who is stuck with me in a 2-person escape room. So welcome back. Dune, would you like to introduce yourself again?
Oh, hi, yeah. I'm Dune Harmon, lover of games and petter of cats.
Do you have any fun things that you did this week?
I am so tired. We just got back from a weekend LARP.
Yay, LARP.
So my whole face is full of dust.
Yes. We're so congested.
Yeah.
And also you're very sunburnt.
Yes.
So that's in the state we're currently in right now.
Hopefully it doesn't come across in my voice too much.
You already have a deep voice, so just like the added dirt is just a little bit more gravelly, I think.
I can hear it being a little more nasally.
Yeah. So a little about the escape room. The one we did was called Chained from Black Cat's #1 Escape Room, Las Vegas. So rarely do I find an escape room that limits you to 2 people, which is why I was so excited to try it out. It also had amazing reviews, both online and the Morty Escape Room app. Basically, the concept is that after a night out of partying in Las Vegas, you wake up chained together in seats back-to-back by a kidnapper. You have 1 hour to solve puzzles based on the 7 deadly sins and an optional bonus puzzle to figure out who your captor's name is. With limited movement allowed and relying on your partner's eyes, the room is definitely unique and a fun spin on a classic theme. So I'm going to get right into this and talk about things that we actually liked about this escape room before we get into things that we didn't like about this escape room.
Yeah, that's definitely a good place to start because we definitely feel like we have a lot to say on both sides.
Yes.
But yeah.
If you can't tell in our tone, we did not enjoy this escape room too much.
Yeah, let's focus on
the positive first, yes. So for me, what I really liked before even going to the escape room is there's like a dry cleaner facade.
Yes, this was very cool.
Yeah, so the thing was kind of ruined the immersion a bit, where it's just like the logos are already, like, the entire building is just like #1 escape room here, #1 escape room here, pointing to the dry cleaners. And then you walk into it, and then it's this dry cleaner and the doors are locked.
Yeah, especially because if you're in Vegas and you go off the strip, you're going to a specific location. You already know where you're going. You're not just trying to catch people wandering the strip. You're off of it. So already it was a weird kind of like, why are there so many signs saying number 1 escape room with big arrows? But then you get inside first room and completely different feel.
Yeah, so it has like the fake facade of a dry cleaner, and there is a phone on the wall that you're supposed to type a number into in order to unlock the escape room. And it's a very easy to find number, but it was still like cute.
Yeah, right off the bat, it kind of cues you into like, ooh, we're playing a game. You're in that space. You're looking for clues. You're figuring things out. That was very fun.
And then it has like a thing. It's like, if you can't figure this out, there's a bell right here to ring and someone will come out. And I'm like, I'm so sorry to anyone who can't get in because the numbers are right there.
It's a solid foot away from the actual phone.
I honestly wish that I had taken video of that, but I just like didn't realize.
I was thinking that too.
And then once you get inside, then you're greeted by people, and then they can show you to which escape room that you like. But I thought, like, I think more escape rooms should do that.
I agree, yeah. And playing with space, like, I'm sure not a lot of escape rooms have the real estate space to have a whole interactive space before you actually enter and can interact with any of the people working there. But it is a very fun way of setting the tone before you actually start.
Couldn't agree more. Were there anything specific that you liked about the escape room? Not to spoil too much about the escape room.
Okay, not to spoil the escape room. I really did like a lot of it. A lot of the concepts were very fun. It being a 2-player escape room meant that you had to really rely on each other, which is a fun concept where I find that there are sometimes in escape rooms where you are separated or things are on opposite sides of the room, and so you have to have like a call and response sort of thing. The element of actually being like chained and limited in your movement was a cool function.
Yeah, I thought what was also nice is that they do provide additional implements, which was just tongs, honestly.
Yeah, it was tongs, and then there was a
flashlight.
There was a few flashlights, right? And then there was a chain with a glove on the end.
Yeah. So that if you brought a child in, then you could still be able to reach it. Though I don't know how the tongs really would have helped very much.
Yeah, and this is where like I liked the aspect that some of the things you had to reach for were kind of hard to do physically. It kind of added to that idea that like a serial killer, got you. I don't think that's spoiling.
No, that's what I said in the description. Yeah, you have like a captor, and I like the idea. It's just like, oh, you have a captor. This person's probably doing it for funsies, because there is that element of you are meant to be able to escape. You're also,
Yeah. It was something that, wow, it's really hard not to say anything negative as I'm talking about some of these things.
Sorry.
Yeah, I will say this. I will say a lot of the actual puzzles, I liked the premise.
Well, I like the theme of 7 Deadly Sins.
Well, sorry, I meant more mechanically wise. I think that maybe, okay, I'm saying a lot of them. Maybe a third of them, I liked the mechanics of the puzzles within the escape room.
Yeah?
Yeah. Wow, it's really hard to...
I think one of the things that I like that's not spoiling too much about the actual way that the puzzle functioned was having voice activated puzzles, which I don't see very often in escape rooms. I think one of the other escape rooms that we have done, which we'll talk about, or I will anyway, talk about in a future episode, is that they do have voice activated stuff, but that's a person or a game master is listening for that. Whereas this was different, where the room automatically did it, which I thought was fun.
Yes. That's all I got.
That's all we got. That's all we got for what we liked.
Yeah. I liked Well, because it's hard because I want to say that I liked some things and in contrast to each other, but I guess I liked some of the elements, and I feel like this isn't necessarily diving directly into the negatives, but I like some of the elements if they were separated. Meaning, like, there was interesting concepts. I will dive into maybe some of the we'll call it negatives, but
the next thing we're talking about is things that we didn't like. So we can, if you want to just hop into that.
Let's roll right into it.
Right. Things we didn't like. We're sorry.
Sorry. There was a lot of concepts that I really liked in the escape room. Again, try not to give too many spoilers, but I think that there was too much trying to be crammed in, whereas I think that if they separated things out to just have maybe two different escape rooms centered around kind of the two main themes, it would be stronger. The Seven Deadly Sins didn't necessarily get across 100% in terms of the mechanics and the story. It's a cool concept, but trying to cram it in with then the Vegas aspect and all of that, it didn't work for me.
Yeah, I felt like theming-wise, kind of the idea is that Vegas is this, corrupt, lewd, all that kind of stuff, which I get that, but I think focusing more on where were you last night and kind of revealing those things rather than Seven Deadly Sins, which I think does work as a concept, and I agree with you that it could be worked as a different thing.
Well, and what I'll say is that I think that Seven Deadly Sins as a concept to center an escape room around is interesting. I think trying to tie it into a chain two-person thing doesn't work. Whereas I think that if you just focus on, okay, the base premise is you're chained together. Let's build from there all of the mechanics and build maybe a story around that, or have a story that, then it would feel tighter. Right? And as such, that I think that if you just designed a Seven Deadly Sins escape room, that you could play along with the Seven Deadly Sins, which did not come across at all.
And I would even love, which we can talk about later, about things that we would change about the escape room. But I definitely, I can even think of how it is Seven Deadly Sins escape room could function, and even how this kind of thing where being chained together, functions as well. There's a lot of things, but I think specifically about this escape room, like what I didn't like is that almost every single puzzle revolved around entering a number into a thing.
Yeah.
It just had no originality whatsoever.
As someone who is pretty dyslexic, at some point we were like, wait, what numbers have we entered and have we not? And was this the code for this thing or this other thing? And that just gets really repetitive and hard to manage. Yeah,
and I think that what's interesting about this one too is because it was only a two-person escape room and there was no accountability where I couldn't look at the puzzle on your side of the room. You being dyslexic for one of the puzzles became our downfall.
Yeah, at the very end, when I guess can I spoil it?
Yeah.
We failed. We did not make it out. But one of the game masters came in and asked if we wanted to know the solutions to some of the things. And when they showed one of them, I was like, no, but I said that. And then I repeated back to you what you told me to enter. And you're like, that's not what I said.
Yeah, it was like one number off.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say what the code is.
Well,
but
it was a swapping of two numbers. It was in a 4-digit number, I swapped two of them.
Yes, and so we spent so much time on this dang number, and it was because you swapped one number.
Yeah, and I would saying it back to you as I was entering it in, and my brain just swapped it.
Yeah, because you were saying it out loud.
And I was
typing in something else.
Yeah.
With more people, at least someone could be like, wait, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like
yeah, or at least someone else to punch in the numbers, right? That variation.
Also, I hate directional locks with like every part of my being.
Oh my gosh. We spent probably 15 minutes spread across the time
Yes.
because we kept trying it and then being like, we can't do this. And we'll come back to it. And 10 minutes later, okay, let's go back to the directional lock. Here's what we think it is. And every single time it failed. And I think, was that another one of them that when we failed, they came in and they...
No, we ended up getting it correct because you kept doing it over and over and over and over, the same exact correct thing. And then we tried variations of it. And then you finally went back to the original again, and then it unlocked.
Yeah. And this is one that I know was not a dyslexia mess up, right? I can do directions. There's only 4 of them. Figure it out. Yeah, but we entered it in so many times, and those locks are just so finicky. It really does make me want to get a brand new one and just try it, because I am wondering, like, do they just degrade very quickly, or are they just kind of crap out of the box?
Yeah, well, especially like I can understand a directional lock if you're putting in 4 to 6 directions.
Oh, yeah. This was like
one
a
was
10-digit code. Yeah.
10 directions, and if you just do it off ever so slightly, it doesn't work. Every single escape room that I have been to that has a directional lock, you have to enter it in at least 3 times for it to work properly. And that drives me insane.
It was maddening. And especially because, and this is where I think playing around with like the 2-player aspect, the chained aspect, the limited mobility made it so that some of those locks were frustrating to struggle with because you're in a compromised position. And that, if it wasn't a directional lock, I think that, but at the same time, maybe that adds to the anxiety of
being captured in a room, I guess.
I'm trying to like spin things in the other direction, but
we're trying so hard to be positive here.
That being said, all in all, I had a good time.
Oh, I had a good time. Well, what I think was very frustrating, which we talked about after doing the escape room, is you haven't done as many escape rooms overall, but you've done some good escape rooms.
Yes.
Whereas I've done a lot of them, and I felt like I was overthinking everything because everything was so simple. Yes,
that was something that I think we definitely touched on afterwards, is that once we kind of were out of there and we started talking about the different mechanics, it was like, oh, yeah, we overthought almost all of it. I think that also lends itself to, I feel a little bad just saying a bunch of negatives now, but the concept of 7 deadly sins, because it didn't come across in the storytelling, which then would lead into solving the puzzles, it made it so that it was hard to keep track of, and it didn't flow.
No, I get what you're talking about. It's just, you're like, okay, well, I'm trying to solve for gluttony. How do you solve for gluttony? Nothing in the room indicates, except for like a little symbol that was involved with it. And it's just like, okay, well, I typed in a number into this box.
Right. I think, we'll redo that part. But the aspect of dealing with the seven deadly sins, because it didn't necessarily come across in all the story elements, which would lead to hints about solving each puzzle, except for one. There was one that was very good, which we will not spoil because it was cool.
Yeah, well, I mean, we won't...
I don't know how much you want to say about that one.
Oh, you mean the captor's name?
No.
Or about the gluttony one?
No, I can't remember which one, but the voice...
That's the gluttony one.
Oh, yeah. Okay, yeah. The gluttony one, yes. That one was so cool.
Yeah, the voice-activated one was, I think, probably my favorite, along with figuring out who the captor was, which we did solve the bonus. We did that.
Yes, we did not actually escape, but we did solve the bonus problem.
Yes, which they're like, yay, you won a prize when we did that, which was like, I think like a big discount on an escape room. And I'm like, I'm not coming back here. Yeah. Why would I do that to myself? Yeah. I already had a bad time.
Admittingly, it does make me a little curious about their other escape rooms.
Yeah, me too. I was just mostly surprised because of how well rated it was.
Right.
Because while I know that you can get like, people could get paid to do the reviews on Google, and sometimes it like fluctuates a little bit, especially within Las Vegas. But the Morty app specifically was what confused me, because I had 5-star reviews on the Morty app, and people were like, I took my kid here, which I also, it was wild to me.
Oh.
Because it's kind of creepy in there.
Huh.
Yeah, there's like a lot of blood on the walls.
There's a lot of blood.
There's a lot of blood on the walls. And there's like dolls, and it's unsettling. It looks like you're stuck in a basement.
Yeah, and all right, again, another thing that was weird. There was an aspect that seemed like a weird future tech thing
Yeah, I did
in the
notice
middle
that.
of the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, that made no sense. But it was completely out of genre. I don't think we did. There was an interactive element to it, but we never, like, you were inserting those cards that we would unlock. But I don't know what the end game of that was.
Yeah, there were a lot of things in there that were like futuristic tech stuff that just made no sense, especially with the theming and
the rest of the room being kind of grungy, like a storage shed.
Yeah, it looked like you got locked in somebody's like storage unit.
Yeah, unit. That was the word.
Yeah, storage unit. Yeah, that word. Don't worry, I forget weird words all the time.
Storage room.
Normal, yeah, storage room. So now that we've talked about all the things we didn't like, which was most of it, we did have fun though. We did have fun. But let's move on to who you think the audience for this would be.
Well, and this is kind of a funny one because we just mentioned that some of the reviews saying bring your kid along. That seems like not the audience that I would say. I think that, and I'm going to tie this into why I think maybe it has a high rating on the Morty app, is that if you are in Vegas, I don't necessarily think that most people are looking for a hard puzzle to dive into, to figure out, to have that sense of, I did it. They're looking for just, I mean, again, most people, I think most people are just there for the ambiance, for the vibe. And it had a vibe. And I think that maybe struggling through a lot of those puzzles, especially because there wasn't necessarily a hard connection with the story to lead you from clue to clue.
I don't know. I think that if it was off the strip, I would agree with that. But because it was just in Vegas, barely, just drive there or lift there pretty easily, no one is getting pulled in like, hey, you're coming in from Las Vegas. You want to do a quick escape room that doesn't revolve around too many like tough, hard-hitting puzzles.
Right.
I would agree with that if it was on the strip and they were trying to get people in rather than actually going and traveling to an escape room outside of the strip.
That's totally fair. And then I was going to say like, oh, well, maybe is it for couples? It's a 2-person thing. But I want to say, I think ideally it is, right? Because there's that aspect of having to communicate to each other and seeing what are you seeing? What am I seeing? And having that bridge of communication to solve puzzles is definitely something that could be geared towards couples very easily because of the disconnect on so many of the things mechanically.
Yeah. Well, what I think is funny about bringing your kid is the whole idea is that you went out partying in Vegas and then you wake up in there. It's like, why is your kid partying in Vegas? Don't do that. Yeah. But that's what I did like for everything is, of course, we were seated the whole time. So everything is within reach. You're not supposed to get up at all.
Yes.
So the audience, I think, is within a certain arm length, ideally. So that's mostly like the adults.
Yes.
That's why they did provide the tongs and other things to push. But
that was another thing that we were talking about as we left the escape room, is that the concept of being sat in a chair for 45 minutes, an hour, does make it easier on you because some escape rooms can be physically more taxing. And playing around with the anxiety of what's going to happen and all that stuff, and then the vibe of being trapped by a serial killer or something like that is a fun concept. And it made for the experience doable. Yeah. And that being said, I think that we did recognize that there was some potential accessibility.
Yeah, well, that's the next thing we're going to talk about after we discuss the audience. But I think aside from like a lot of adult theming within the room, I think that this room is definitely for people who haven't really done many escape rooms, so that you're not overthinking it.
Yeah.
Because I definitely overthought everything.
I remember at one point, you're like, all right, tell me what you see, because we unlocked a portion of it, and I was like, okay, this thing's moving, and there's like these numbers or these dolls in positions, and I was like, okay, well maybe the positions of the doll's hands are the directions for the directional lock, and you're like, I don't.
I was like, that's too simple.
Yeah, like that's too simple. Like, no, and then we went on a whole different tangent, and
Yep.
I think that's what it ended up being, right?
No, it wasn't the hand directions. That ended up being for a different puzzle. But yes, basically it was like that, where everything I was like, it can't be that. That's crazy.
Yeah, so we would go on this long tangent of discussing like, okay, well maybe it's because of this and this and this, and nope, it was always...
it was just it was just like way more simplified. But I do think that most of the escape room that we spent our time on was more accidentally putting in wrong things, or we're like, we did do that. It was mostly the directional lock, honestly.
The directional lock, and then I think there was two other ones that one of them was actually we did like the concept of a number puzzle.
Yeah, that was the bonus puzzle that we did. That was the only puzzle we really liked, was the bonus puzzle that we ended up doing, because we were like, oh, that was fun, and because it was a little bit harder, we didn't overthink it at all.
Oh man, I'm not remembering which one you're talking about. I'm thinking about the very last one that I was really struggling with the flashing numbers.
Oh yeah,
and it was like a weird...
I did actually like that one.
You liked that one, which was, and here's what I'll say is like there was some elements that did play into what I think we both love about some escape rooms, and they do it well, is hitting on different skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that one, oh boy, I could not do it. It was just hitting on all of my dyslexic issues of flashing numbers and a pattern of numbers changing and counting down. You're like, no, there's a pattern here. I'm like, I'm not.
Yep.
Sure.
That's the one thing I am pretty good at with escape rooms, is I can see the patterns in things. So I like those. I like those ones. You not so much. Well, I think specifically with numbers, I think is a problem.
Numbers, and that was actually really fun, because I think that was the last one, and where it was getting down to the last like 20 seconds, and you were trying to tell me what the code was, and I was trying to punch it in, and I failed us on that one.
Well, I think. Well, we could go back to this later, but yeah, I think we would have escaped if we hadn't spent so many times on things, because basically we did have all the clues or we knew all the answers to everything. We just didn't get it in time because we were messing with the directional lock and the other one where it was just like swap the number due to dyslexia.
Yeah. So there was a few times of that, but then there was also the overthinking aspects where we spent a lot of time thinking that it was, puzzles were more complex than they ended up being.
Yep. Yeah, so I definitely recommend, if anyone does want to try this escape room, don't overthink it. This is probably going to be one that's easy to like kind of integrate someone into just that puzzle mindset. If it's just like if numbers are your thing, sure, go for that. But yeah, this definitely has more of an adult theme. It is rated less scary than their other escape rooms. Almost all their other escape rooms are technically scary. This is their least scary one.
And again, we already said that the room was covered in blood.
Yeah, it was covered in blood.
Fake body parts.
Oh, yeah. So it's a little unsettling. Don't bring your kids. The theming might be very confusing. But next is accessibility, which we have been discussing already a little bit. Dyslexia is difficult.
Nope.
I would also say colorblindness would be an issue, because almost every single puzzle was in red.
That's true. Yep.
Because it was all in blood.
Well, it was in blood, and then also like the red lights with a lot of the things. Yeah, I can totally see how if you had any color blindness, it would be very difficult.
Yeah.
You being sat for that long was nice in some senses. It's not necessarily the most comfortable.
No,
chair.
They're just hard wooden chairs. Yeah. This captor did not care about our comfortability at all.
Definitely near the end, I was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to move.
Yeah, especially because you're not supposed to get up the whole time and all that. So, I mean, I think that if you have issues with sitting that long, especially in like wooden chairs, that you're probably fine to bring in some sort of cushion. Like, sure. I know that like my brother would probably be fine because like sitting in an escape room, that's great for him, but he would need something to be able to sit on that so that he wouldn't be feeling bad.
Yeah. And then, I'm trying to think of different accessibility situations. I think that if you are wheelchair bound and you were able to get into the chair, I think that you could probably do the puzzle, which is pretty rare.
Because everything's within arm reach. I mean, if you have any issues with mobility with your arms, that's definitely going to be a thing.
Oh, yeah.
But I do think that of the escape rooms that I've done, this is probably going to be one of the more accessible ones. There's no crawling around. There's no, like, you're not reaching for anything. And you may be able to, and depending on which side of the room that you sit on, that also affects it. So if you do have any sort of issues with more reach, one side, I did feel like you reached a lot less or had at least more implements in order to like reach to the other side. But there's also no issue passing things back and forth to each other.
Yeah.
If you have issues with like turning around on sharp angles, I did have a lot of issues where I was like, this is kind of painful to try to see what's going on your side of the room.
And that's where like you being so much more experienced in escape rooms, like there was puzzles and things where I didn't really know how to communicate to you or there was times when it was like, okay, let me just try to look around and see what you're seeing, which made for both of us, we also just in general wanted to see the other side. So part of it was also you needing to maybe see the puzzle that I was struggling with. And the other half of it was just, I want to see what you were seeing. But we did do a lot of squirming around in the chair, which might be a little difficult for some people.
But if you're really good at describing things, then you're probably going to be fine. If you know exactly, you're like, all right, on the right-hand corner, this is going on. I thought what actually was interesting is I did have a mirror above my area where I could see back into your section, but you didn't have that on your side. You couldn't see via mirror onto my side.
Yes, which is why I was doing so much like squirming around because I'm seeing. So that mirror does make it a little easier. Yes.
So if you have issues like turning around and stuff, if you're trying to see the other side, definitely sit on the side like toward the entrance of when you are coming into the escape room. I think that's probably going to be the more accessible side of the room by far. But most of the things aside from that, it's like colorblindness, dyslexia, especially because it's like almost all entirely number-based puzzles. Those are going to be major issues that I would find. But I did like that the parking was there and it was close and easy to access. I always complain about non-accessible parking.
Yes, and everything had ramps and stuff like that, so you could wheelchair it or easily with crutches or canes and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think overall I would say this is probably one of the most accessible escape rooms that I've seen. But you're going to have a harder time finding those kinds of escape rooms with more people.
Yeah, definitely. And I will say, I think just to highlight something you said, it's, if you have any physical limitations in terms of your arms or reaching for things, being on the further inside will be very difficult. There was a lot of things I had to really reach for, and I have got a pretty, big
wingspan.
Wingspan. It's like, wingspan? Is that?
Yeah, wingspan.
Yep.
So now we're going to the price. So this was $29 per person, which an average escape room is like normally $35 a person, which I thought was decent.
Honestly, I think for the experience, totally worth it.
Yeah, $29 is pretty reasonable. I mean, I've gone to other escape rooms that are much more expensive and also been like, okay, that was fine.
Yeah, again, like we had a fun time.
You're saying that like you're at gunpoint.
Believe me,
we had a good time, but it was mostly because of the company, not so much the escape room itself.
And I think because both of us like to break down concepts and puzzles and that sort of meta commentary on it, that we did have fun being like, oh, this is an interesting element. And then as we were in the escape room being like, but it doesn't really fit for this. Yeah.
So now that we've talked about all the normal things that we do, personal recommendations for how we could have made this better executed. I can start off, my idea, of course, for 7 Deadly Sins is that there is 7 different rooms. I know that is crazy because there would be a different room and it would be super, so much of the building would be necessary for this, but I would love that.
That's real cool.
Yeah. I would pay, like, if it was like a 2-hour escape room where it was just like, I don't know, $60, so like a little bit more than the average escape room price, like more, almost double, then... going through each room that is highly themed for 7 Deadly Sins, I would love that.
I completely agree, and I think that would be, well, this isn't necessarily like how to improve that escape room. This is a completely different concept.
No, I'm going on 2 different themes.
Yes.
Taking the 7 Deadly Sins part, and then it's improving the current concept, I guess.
So, and I think we hit on this a little bit early on, is like, I think there's 2 concept here, is the 7 Deadly Sins and the limitations of 2 people chained together. I really think that, what you're saying, a entire 7-room escape room would be really cool, especially themed around them, because this is something that we agreed that it was really lacking in is the story element linking to the puzzles. Whereas I think that the concept of a 7 Deadly Sin escape room is really cool, and you could theme each room around a whole bunch of stories and puzzles around that that sin.
Mm-hmm.
That
and
sounds
then you
fun.
get even crazier, where there has to be 7 people specifically who play the escape room, so each one has a thing tied to them.
Or is there 7 rooms, and each one of your 7 party members are in each one of the rooms?
Oh, there is an escape room that is like that, because Crossroads does that, but it's like a horror themed one where each person is a horror trope.
Ooh.
So I think like doing something like that with 7 Deadly Sins would be really fun.
Yeah, and I could totally see how there might be some the room story, and then a larger story that then you were using like phones or an intercom system to be able to communicate with your other friends, and then build a story that would be that. Yeah,
you're just sending like little text messages, or it's through the room. That
sounds like a dreadful experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, could you imagine everybody at the same time trying to use a comm system toward each other, where you could just basically like send messages to everyone that everyone can see?
Yeah, but the thought of trying to type out and explain something sounds
You
horrific.
Send voice memos.
Oh, great.
Everything's voice memos now.
So not only do you have to have the time to record your side, but then the other person has to have the time to listen to it and then record back. Yeah. Oh my gosh. With 7... Oh, okay. We're spinning out of control.
Crazy. Listen. We're just ideas, people. We're not saying they're good ideas. They're just ideas.
I think any way you execute it, a 7 Deadly Sin themed escape room would be very, very cool, with proper story elements involved, regardless of how many rooms or separating your 7 party members into each room. It's a cool concept.
Yeah, and I think also theming wise, I would love to see how creative escape rooms get with the aesthetics and the props and everything. And I do feel like that was very much lacking with this current room, with Change specifically. But I also would add more of the chained aspect to the room in general, going back to like how I would improve this room in general.
And I, again, unfortunately, I think that both of our kind of concept of the 7 Deadly Sins and the chained aspect, I think both do better if we just create new escape rooms for both. But for a chained aspect, a 2-player aspect, I do think that, again, it's a cool concept. I'd love to see the concept. What we had and what we experienced didn't necessarily play enough on that element.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in a way that was then easy to communicate back and forth. Again, all of the numbers, you can't, that just gets too confusing.
What I think that I would have really liked to see, using the same concept of a 2-person escape room that you are chained to each other, is basically that it is 2 separate rooms that you're in, where you are chained through the wall, and then you also have to find like a hidden rock where you can see into the other person's room, so you can give them that kind of help where you can see into it. But it's like but you are moving around the room essentially where you are clicking things. And it's like, hold on, I need to like move, like give me more slack, which we did have to do in this where we had to give more slack to each other by chairs. But I think it would have been cool with like 2 separate rooms.
Agreed. And this is where I think it would be very hard to make the concept of a chained 2-player experience that doesn't hit on some accessibility issues. I think that would be hard. I think that, if we're just talking concepts for us that we like, it sounds super cool. I think that any way of doing this besides sitting would make it hard to do accessibility wise.
But if you were still doing the sitting where you were in 2 different rooms, either like you have like a camera up there where it's clearly that you are seeing the other side of the feed, there are things that you can do in order to see into the other room where you can give some help. But I also think less numbers, more symbols, also less blood. Like, I like the blood.
The
add blood. Just don't make them required for you to see them in order to put them into the puzzle.
Sure.
Like, if you're having a bunch of numbers in blood, people will not see it because some of those numbers were like really far.
Oh, yeah. Some of them were a solid 10 feet away and with things hanging in front of it where we didn't see it until you were able to turn all the way around and like lean way over. And then you had a different angle than I did. And you're like, oh, well, the number's this. And I'm like, I don't have eyesight on that because there's something hanging directly in front of it. So, I think that playing around with the limited mobility is a fun concept. Again, very hard to make it accessible, but it's a very fun concept. I would love to see, more puzzles that require the back and forth of the physical movements. And then again, diversifying the types of puzzles so that the solutions still require both sides to work together.
And I also think that you don't necessarily need theming per se on why, like, escaping, because like, sure, this person could just be weird and they're making you do stuff. Doing more things like, oh, I'm legitimately trying to escape. There are limited things in this storage room or wherever you're stuck, and you kind of solving using real world stuff in order to get out of a room. So it feels like you actually are trying to escape from a place.
Yes.
That I think would really improve it rather than being like the whole typical horror movie where they're like, I'm messing with you. I have laid out puzzles and now you gotta figure out my weird tricks and stuff. And it's like, is that your thing in Vegas? That's a weird choice.
It was weirdly Machiavellian.
Yeah. Did you have any other things that you think would change it? Or otherwise, I think we've covered basically everything.
I think so. I don't think so. I think I'm kind of tapped out. It was overall fun experience.
Yeah.
How to change it? Unfortunately, I think we just hit on a point where any way of really making this an escape room that we would be like, oh my gosh, this was the best thing ever, would require just a completely different design and a different story, separating the concepts out.
Yeah. I think the concepts were there.
Yep.
I just don't think it was executed well, and I also wouldn't recommend it for people.
This is a tricky one because I will say, I think if there's 2 people in Vegas, you want to do something silly, fun, do a puzzle, sure.
Yeah, sure. I don't think that it deserves the ratings that it's got, but sure, go for it. I'm not going to judge anyone for going to most things. So I'm just like, yeah, if this sounds like it's your vibe, go for it. Well, thank you again, dude, for coming on to the show. It's always a delight. I'm sure we will hopefully find better escape rooms to do together, which we did technically do another escape room after that we really liked. Until next time.
An echo is not your voice.
Check out our website, immersivexps.com, to join our free Ko-fi, which will have visuals and additional content of the immersive experiences discussed in each episode. You are an immersive experience artist or creator, no matter how small. Consider contacting us so you can take part on a future podcast. This podcast is recorded and produced by SoCal Podcast Studio in Orange County. Thanks for listening. All right. Yeah, a little known fact, Dune is also a bird.
Yep. Well, bird person.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sitting in a chair.
Mhm.
With my wings.
Yeah. So now we're going to the price. What?
I'm just imagining instead of having arms, having wings, and that also making it very difficult to solve a lot of the puzzles.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's going to be, you're just going to struggle through life if you have wing issues.
You don't have arms and you have wings.
Yeah. That's going to be most of life.
Yes.
Yes, going back to the price.